Hey everyone, and welcome back to Controller Culture. Today, we're taking a look at 10 of the biggest video game releases coming out in June 2026. This month is kinda all over the place. You've got surprising and long-awaited remakes, classic franchises making a return, fighting games, RPGs, strategy games, racing games, and even some massive early access launches that people have been waiting years for. So, with all that said, let's get into the biggest games releasing in June 2026. So, starting things off this month, we have Final Fantasy VII Rebirth finally making its way to other platforms. Originally released as a PlayStation exclusive, Rebirth was already considered one of the biggest RPGs in recent years. So, seeing it arrive on Switch 2 and Xbox Series consoles is a huge deal for a lot of players who missed it the first time around. Developed and published by Square Enix, this is the second entry in the Final Fantasy VII Remake trilogy, continuing Cloud and the party's journey outside Midgar. And compared to the first remake, Rebirth massively expanded the scale of everything. The world is far more open, exploration is a huge focus, side content is everywhere, and the combat system evolved into something that blends action gameplay with classic Final Fantasy strategy incredibly well. One of the biggest reasons people love Rebirth is because it somehow manages to balance nostalgia with new ideas. It respects the original game while also changing enough story elements to keep longtime fans constantly guessing. The Switch 2 version is especially interesting because people are curious to see how well the hardware handles a game of this scale visually. Meanwhile, Xbox players have been waiting years for this moment. So yeah, this is easily one of the biggest RPG releases hitting new platforms this year. Next up, we have the Gothic 1 Remake, which is another of the more interesting RPG releases of the month. For people who never played the original, Gothic was one of those cult classic RPGs from the early 2000s that built a ridiculously dedicated fanbase because of how immersive and unforgiving it was. It wasn't a hand-holding RPG at all. The world was dangerous, progression felt earned, and your choices actually mattered. This remake is being developed by Alchemia Interactive and published by THQ Nordic. From everything shown so far, it looks like they're trying to modernize the experience without completely losing the identity of the original game. It's still a dark fantasy RPG centered around exploration, factions, survival, and character progression. But now, it has modern visuals, updated combat, and a much more detailed world. A lot of people are excited because there really aren't many RPGs today that feel quite like Gothic. It has that older school design philosophy where the world doesn't care about you and you slowly become stronger through experience rather than just following map markers everywhere. If this remake lands properly, it could end up introducing an entirely new generation of players to one of the most respected RPG franchises out there. Now, this next one is definitely a different kind of release, but it's getting attention simply because of how massive both franchises are. Monopoly Star Wars Heroes vs. Villains takes the classic Monopoly formula and completely reworks it around iconic Star Wars characters, locations, and factions. The game is designed more as a party-focused strategy title, combining traditional Monopoly mechanics with Star Wars-themed abilities, events, and collectible systems. For fans of Star Wars, that's obviously the main appeal here. Whether you lean more toward the Jedi and Rebel side or prefer the Sith and Empire aesthetic, the game seems to be leaning heavily into fan service and recognizable locations from across the franchise. Licensed games like this usually live or die based on presentation and replayability. If the online systems, customization, and multiplayer options are solid, this could actually become a pretty fun casual game to play with friends. It's definitely not the biggest hardcore gaming release this month, but it absolutely has the potential to become one of those surprise games people casually sink dozens of hours into. Up next, we have Lost Castle 2. After spending a long time in early access, June 11 marks the game's massive 1.0 launch. And for fans of roguelites and chaotic co-op games, this is easily one of the biggest indie releases of the year. The original Lost Castle built a surprisingly passionate audience because it combined side-scrolling beat-em-up combat with roguelite progression in a way that was easy to pick up but incredibly addictive with friends. It had that perfect one more run energy, where every attempt felt different thanks to randomized loot, weapons, builds, and upgrades. Lost Castle 2 looks like a major expansion of everything people liked about the first game. The sequel massively increases the amount of weapons, treasures, enemies, bosses, and build variety, while also pushing harder into cooperative gameplay with up to 4 players, causing absolute chaos on screen. What's interesting here is that the game has already built a strong reputation during early access, with players consistently praising the combat feel, replayability, and sheer amount of content being added over time. Now the full launch is finally bringing the complete story ending, new nightmare difficulties, progression overhauls, and in-game systems that longtime players have been waiting for. And honestly, this feels like one of those indie games that could quietly consume people's lives for weeks once the full release finally drops. One of the more intriguing RPG-style games releasing this month is the Adventures of Elliot: The Millennium Tales. This is an action-adventure RPG that immediately caught people's attention because of its art direction and classic fantasy feel. The game appears to mix exploration-heavy gameplay with narrative-driven progression, while also leaning into a more stylized visual presentation that feels inspired by older fantasy RPGs. What's interesting is that the developers seem to be focusing heavily on world-building and storytelling rather than just non-stop combat. There's a strong emphasis on discovering ancient history, exploring forgotten ruins, and uncovering mysteries tied to the world itself. Games like this can sometimes come out of nowhere and build a really good dedicated fan base if the writing and atmosphere are strong enough. People are especially interested because there's been a growing demand lately for fantasy RPGs that feel more adventurous and atmospheric rather than purely cinematic. So, while this may not be the biggest AAA release on paper, it definitely has the potential to surprise people. Next up, we have R-Type Tactics 1-2 Cosmos, which is bringing back 2 classic strategy games from one of gaming's most iconic shoot-'em-up franchises. Now, when most people hear R-Type, they think of side-scrolling sci-fi action and brutally difficult arcade gameplay. But the Tactics games took the franchise in a completely different direction by turning it into a turn-based strategy experience. This collection includes remastered versions of both games with updated visuals, modernized systems, and improved accessibility features. The gameplay focuses heavily on tactical positioning, fleet management, and strategic decision-making, all wrapped inside the dark sci-fi atmosphere the series is known for. What makes this release interesting is that tactical strategy games have become way more popular again over the last few years. So there's actually a pretty good chance this collection finds a much bigger audience now than it originally did. And for longtime fans of the series, this is also just a cool way to preserve 2 games that a lot of people never got the chance to play. EA Sports UFC 6 is finally stepping into the octagon this month. And as expected, this is probably going to be one of the biggest sports releases of the summer. Developed by EA Vancouver, UFC 6 continues the MMA simulation series with updated rosters, improved visuals, and what EA says are major gameplay refinements. The biggest thing people always care about with these games is the actual fighting feel. Striking, grappling, stamina systems, and animations can completely make or break an MMA game. From what's been shown so far, UFC 6 appears to be focusing heavily on smoother transitions, more realistic damage systems, and better presentation overall. Sports games tend to live off community engagement and online competition, so a lot of the long-term success here is going to come down to balance and post-launch support. Still, UFC games always attract a huge audience, especially with how much mainstream popularity MMA has now compared to even a decade ago. So, this is almost guaranteed to be a massive launch regardless. Now, this is probably one of the biggest surprise releases of the month. Star Fox is officially returning on the Nintendo Switch 2. Fans of the franchise have been waiting a very long time for Star Fox to return, and now it's back. Star Fox has kind of existed in this weird space where people clearly love the series, but Nintendo hasn't consistently known what to do with it. This new entry appears to be a remake of Star Fox 64 and is bringing the focus back to fast-paced space combat, aerial dogfighting, and cinematic missions, which is exactly what most fans wanted in the first place. Because it's launching on Switch 2, there's also a lot of curiosity around how ambitious the game actually is technically. People are expecting larger environments, smoother performance, and more cinematic presentation than previous entries. The big thing here is nostalgia mixed with potential. Star Fox is one of Nintendo's most recognizable franchises, but it hasn't had that true modern breakout in the way that Zelda or Metroid has had on the Nintendo Switch 2. So, if this game actually delivers, it could easily become one of these standout Switch 2 releases of the year. Also releasing on June 25th is Dead or Alive 6 Last Round. This updated version of Dead or Alive 6 appears to be positioning itself as the definitive edition of the fighting game, bringing together additional content, gameplay refinements, and upgraded visuals for current hardware. Developed by Team Ninja and Koei Tecmo, the Dead or Alive series has always stood out because of its fast-paced combat system, environmental interactions, and strong counter-based gameplay mechanics. And while the franchise definitely has a reputation for its presentation and character designs, longtime fighting game players know the actual combat system underneath is genuinely solid and highly technical. There's interest around this release because the fighting game genre is in a really strong place right now. Between Street Fighter, Tekken, Mortal Kombat, and the random surge of animated fighters, there's a huge audience actively looking for competitive fighting games again. So this could be a good opportunity for Dead or Alive to re-enter the conversation in a much bigger way. Then finally, we have Drive Rally, which is bringing a much more arcade-style approach to rally racing. Instead of going full hardcore simulation, this game leans heavily into fast gameplay, stylized visuals, and classic rally-inspired racing mechanics. That's honestly part of the reason people are interested in it. There's always room for serious sim races, but arcade rally games have become a lot less common over the years. The game seems to focus on varied environments, quick races, vehicle upgrades, and that old-school pick-up-and-play feeling that a lot of racing fans miss. Visually, it also has a really distinct style compared to more realistic racing games, which helps it stand out immediately. And depending on how good the handling feels, this could easily become one of those really fun, lower-key releases that develops a dedicated community over time. So there you have it. Those are 10 of the biggest games releasing in June 2026. Overall, this month actually has a really good mix of genres. RPG fans are eating well. Fighting game fans have some interesting releases. Strategy players are getting classic revivals, and Switch 2 owners especially have a pretty stacked month ahead. But let me know down in the comments, which of these games are you most excited for? And if you enjoyed the video, make sure to leave a like, subscribe to Controller Culture, and turn on notifications so you don't miss future gaming uploads. Thanks for watching, and as always, I'll see you all in the next one.